expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meets and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart. But tread the circle thrice about to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, tonight we're going to go legend tripping with Christopher Balzano, who is going to kind of take us into the deep forest, the Ocala National Forest. And those of you who know Chris knows that where he goes, hunting follows, and the Ocala Forest is no exception. Now, Chris is a writer, a researcher, a folklorist. He's been documenting the unexplained since 1994 and has been a figure in the paranormal world through his books, his articles, and work as the director of Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads and the current host of the podcast Tripping on Legends. As always, questions and comments are welcome from the chat room. And if you're listening live and want to join us over in chat, we're at paraxradionetwork.com. All right, Chris, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Well, you just keep writing books, and they're interesting. And, you know, what can I say? I'm a sucker.
No, it's funny because I don't think of myself as being paranormally blessed at all. So I find it interesting you said, wherever I go, paranormal follow. It's the exact opposite. I get called out to these places, whether it's just a little bit of a legend or something like the Ocala, which like I feel literally was trying to draw me in. I go where the ghosts are. They never come to me, oddly enough.
You never ask, but you should. Just be polite. Yeah. All right. So before we get into the book proper, when I opened the book that you sent me, thank you very much, there was a pamphlet in it which said, read the book and cast your votes. So do you want to explain what that's about?
You know, I was trying to come up with a new marketing claim. Like everything I did for this book, I wanted to kind of break away from like just like straightforward ghost storytelling, straightforward like marketing even. And so what I did was I put in what I like to call my Sinister Seven. So what I thought were the 7 spookiest or creepiest ghost stories that were in there. And every time I mail it out to somebody or I see someone at an event, I hand it to them. I say, read the book, vote for your scariest, put the hashtag Haunted Ocala on it. And around Halloween time, I'm going to be giving away something for someone that responds. So I wanted people to kind of like be interactive with the story. Like, hey, you tell me what you think is the creepiest one. So a little bit of audience participation.
Okay. Well, I mean, I kind of figured that, but you know me, I'll look at it with one eye and go out the other ear.
I'm with you. So you're gonna have to cast your vote. Are you gonna have you read the book? Are you going to cast your vote here live online?
I probably could. I read the book, and yeah, I mean, but see, this is the thing. There are so many different facets of hauntings and things going on in that forest, paranormal stuff. So, it's kind of hard, one's a ghost and one is this and one is that. You cover all the bases with these stories. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to say if it was all like a ghosty book, then this kept happening and, this apparition showed up. That's one thing, but you got a lot of stuff in there. But let's talk about the forest first.
Okay.
I mean, it's in Central Florida, and you said this it's a place of hauntings and mysteries, and is about an hour away from the happiest place on earth, which would be Disney World. But just FYI, if you ever land here on the West Coast, and it would be a nice car trip for you, you definitely need to check out the West Coast happiest place on earth, because Disneyland is full of mysteries and hauntings, including Walt Disney's hidden apartment above the fire station on Main Street. And, Walt just kind of roams the grounds as well. So, yeah, just saying.
We and I know you're the master of Anaheim and LA hauntings.
Well, not exactly, but go ahead.
Well, we actually, so as you were saying in the intro, all of this is sparked by my podcast, which is called Tripping on Legends. And sometimes I do it alone. Sometimes I have two current co-hosts that are really both strong. And a lot of times I do it with my daughter, who is 13. I keep saying 14 for some reason, but she's 13. I keep giving her a year. And we did an entire episode of the hauntings of our Disney. Mm-hmm. And it is just as crazy. And the amount of paranormal activity, but more importantly, ghostly legends, because it's this place that inspires anywhere your imagination goes. A ghostly legend is going to follow, right? Like anything from a house that looks haunted to a place where there's a lot of energy. And so we did actually an entire episode on, actually it was both Disney and Universal.
Epcot? Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the weird thing is that the original location, the original Disney World was going to be in the Ocala. And for some reason they scrapped it. Now, of course, the official story is that he was able to do that whole sketchy deal where he was using parent companies to buy land. He was able to do it easier in the Orlando area, but other people say there was something even that he could sense in what was going on in the Ocala that that drew him away from it.
Hmm.
So,
well, yeah. I mean, and that's probably, divine intervention or something. It's just like, let's not do this, let's do it the hard way. But yeah, I mean, it's like, and this, people that talk about the happiest place on earth, the best feeling place on earth, blah, blah, blah. Most of those are haunted worse than other places, don't you think?
They have to be, right? Because, if we think of hauntings as, if you get away from the folklore, you think of it in terms of like the pseudoscience, where energy is trapped, where a lot of people gather and there's a lot of juice going on. Amusement parks like that, those are perfect locations to have something stay behind. Mm-hmm. And also, and this is like where the nefarious part of all of these types of places comes up, there's that seedy underbelly of it where the employees are having it rough. That it's such a big corporation that anything that does go wrong is going to get covered up. And then that cuts into the folklore part of like, it's a restless spirit because they can't even acknowledge that something weird happened or that there's a death going on because the company covered it up. Which oftentimes when you're investigating urban legends, that's the reason why, that's like the no one knows about it because they covered it up. And so those locations have both the pseudoscience reason for a good haunting and also this weird urban legend classic motif going on with them as well.
Yeah, and then you have the history of the place. Now, Orlando and where Disneyland is, Disneyland was just an orange field, orange trees. We had Native Americans around, but, it wasn't like somebody's farm or somebody's home, But when you get to amusement parks like that, first of all, people die at amusement parks. Yeah. And those are kind of the scary things. But then I would think that spirit would flock to an amusement park because it's all kinds of people there, things to see, things to do. You can go anywhere you want when you die, apparently. So why not hang out in a happy place? Or, maybe the people that fell off the roller coaster or something are there just, cursing everybody that walks by. It's hard to tell. But happy places always have kind of a dark underbelly.
Yeah. And you know what? Of course, we're going with the spooky route, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not always the case when it comes to hauntings.
Right.
When I was doing research into the Bridgewater Triangle, for example, there's this infamous, one of the creepiest places I've ever researched called Taunton State Hospital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet the majority of the ghosts, once you get away from the creepy shadow men that walk the halls,
Mm-hmm.
one of the most commonly seen ghosts there are people on the front lawn. And one of the things that was different about Taunton when it first opened up was it believed in things like art therapy or vitamin D healing, and people were outside. And these people who were suffering from mental health issues had some of the best moments of their life, the clearest moments of their adulthood on those grounds. And those are the spirits that are seen most often, and they're happy spirits. In this really, really dark and creepy place, the lawn is where the happy ghosts are, and there's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the whole genre is just so interesting. It's not what people think, and open-mindedly you see both sides of the coin. Maybe there's more than two sides of the coin even. It's like peeling back an onion or something. There's layers upon layers. So,
I would say that in most recent times, since I've been a legend tripper versus an investigator, I have never had a paranormal experience to me that was scary. Almost every single one of them was more uplifting or confirming or game-changing, like shifting the way that you think. And almost none of them, and I've been to some pretty scary places here in Florida, none of them made me shriek or want to leave or run away or anything like that. Whenever I used to, back in my investigator days, what I would always tell someone, they would tell me their ghost story, they'd be shivering, they'd be freaked out about it, they'd want to talk about it, and the first question I would always ask them is, once they told their story, were you scared because it wasn't supposed to happen, or were you scared because it was actually you felt threatened? And almost always it's because it's not supposed to happen, which doesn't necessarily sell books, but that's the truth behind the paranormal, right?
Yeah, that's true. All right, so give us a little background about the forest and how you were drawn to it, or because I know you go to really neat places and do these legend trips, but where'd you end up in the forest?
So it's funny. I started doing tripping on legends, and my first step was, all right, I want to know. I don't want to know the big ghosts, right? I know all the big haunted locations, and people talk about them. I want to know the little small stories that are in these small towns. Mm-hmm. And so I started sending out these kind of feeler emails to librarians, because if you go to any library in Massachusetts, where I'm from, there's a file of ghost stories, right? That aren't necessarily on the shelf, but if you ask the librarian, she'll bring you around the counter and she'll open the folder and so I'm trying to get those. And I was almost immediately, no one really responded, but almost immediately, 10 minutes after I sent the email, the librarians from Astor, Florida, sent me something back and said, we'd love to talk to you about it. Do you speak about ghosts? We'd love to schedule an event. I'm like, whoa, I'm just starting here. I can't even. When I eventually got to Astor, probably about a year and a half later, it was one of the, I'm going to use the word eerie, one of the eeriest places I've ever been, because almost immediately I noticed light was different. The way that it almost had this. Now in Florida, you've got that the heat coming up from the pavement fields thing, but this was almost like light wasn't going the right way. It was almost like through a prism. And even more, my co-host at the time that I was talking to, she was only a few feet away from me, and yet our voices were echoing back and forth to each other. So I almost immediately noticed that this area there was something messed up with the waves. Sound waves were weird. Light was weird. We took pictures and everything didn't come out, or it was really dark even though it was bright out. And then when I got inside, and it was a small little library. I mean, it's a tiny, tiny library. It's a trailer, really. And everybody had a haunted legend from the town. And everyone was sharing them back and forth, and sometimes they were finishing each other's sentences with a tail end of the legend, and other times they were talking about a whole new one. And I went, wow, there's a lot of ghost stories in this little place. They can't all be legends. And if they are legends, my thought always going into something is, something is going on and we've created a legend to try to explain it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I started to do, just like when I was doing the Bridgewater Triangle stuff, as I was learning more about the area, I kept getting more and more people calling me out or telling me a legend, and all of my stories were around this forest.
Mm-hmm.
And once I started getting into the non-paranormal creepiness that was going on in terms of cult activity, in terms of true crime stuff, I said, this is another Freetown State Forest. And then I just completely opened up Pandora's box. And I was hit with more than I could deal with. And every time I go there, all you have to do is talk to someone. And when I say the Ocala, I'm talking about not only the forest, not only the 600 square miles of the forest, but also the towns that surround it,
Mm-hmm.
which I say are in the shadow of the Ocala. All you have to do is, if I were to walk up to someone here in Fort Myers and say, oh, I write about ghosts, or like, have you ever heard a ghost story? They'd like shrug and be like, yeah, back home in Michigan, or but like they'd say something. You go to the Ocala and you say what you do, and 4 people have a story to tell you about something weird that happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just getting I was getting pulverized with stories, like story after story. I posted stuff and I got like 500 responses from people online. And then the more I was talking to people, and I have my own story with this as well, but the more I was talking to people, the more they were telling me about this weird thing that goes on there, this totally, and everyone accepts it, this totally unexplained thing, which is what I call the shift.
Mm-hmm.
And the shift essentially is you never know where anything is going to be in the Ocala. People who spend their entire life in the woods, and people who are living near the Ocala generally are generational. Like they've been there, their parents were there, maybe even their grandparents were there. Mm-hmm. They've walked the trails of the forest 100 times, 1,000,000 times. They've hunted there. They've ridden ATVs there. They've, had parties out in the woods. They've had walks by cemeteries. They'll tell you straight out, the trail changes every time you go on it. Mm. Or a cemetery that's there on a Tuesday won't be there on Wednesday, but it'll be there again on Friday. Things just shift dimensionally. I don't know whether it's consciously, like a consciousness kind of thing. Hunters will mark things down on their GPSs if they find like, oh wow, like there seems to be that like something is feeding in this area, like whether it's hogs, turkeys, like this is a really good area. So they'll mark it on their GPS. They'll go there again, and the geography will be completely different. And it's only a week later. And they kind of shrug and go, yep, that's the Ocala. Wah, wah, wah. Like, and that's the attitude that I was obsessed with. Like, how do you people accept this? You know what I'm saying? Like, why do you people just kind of shrug it off and go, well, that's what you get for living near the Ocala, And so it was really trying to get as many of those stories, and more importantly, try to find that narrative in that. Like, try to tell the story of these people and the weirdness that's going on when that is what you're dealing with. All of this shifting things and people accepting it. So, and people having paranormal experiences as far away as, like, let's say Gainesville, which is probably like a half hour, 40 minutes away. Mm-hmm. And they go, well, it happened because I was near the Ocala. Uh-huh. So even people who are outside of what we would consider the area still feel like they're living in the shadow of it. So,
all right. So you say that this isn't a typical ghost book, and probably can't be read like a typical one. So you want to explain that?
Yeah. Like first of all, this took me longer to write than any other book I've ever written. Huh. This was the hardest book for me to write, because I was trying to make sense of all of that weird paranormal supernatural stuff. Then you throw into it the true crime aspect, right? Mm-hmm. And my initial thought was, again, going back to Bridgewater Triangle, I was going to write Dark Woods Part 2. So Dark Woods was one of my very first books. It's about the Freetown State Forest. And I really love that book because it asks the question of, is all of this stuff related? Are these true crimes? Like, why are cults finding their way here? Why are the crimes that happen in this area, why are they so much more intense, and why are they happening here at all? It's a small little town. I wanted to make this book like that, And I got so much on the true crime stuff that I froze up. I couldn't even like write about the true crime. I could only use it in terms of context.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was writing it, I had to decide: am I going to use the legend parts? Am I going to use people's true stories? And so it took me months to write the first chapter of the book, which was a story told to me by, I think she's now 23 or 24. Mm-hmm. And it was the most rambling ghost story you've ever heard in your life, that went all the way from there were people walking in the woods to there were witches burning things to there was a floating baby head to these airplanes started to spy on us. I mean, all this stuff. But what wasn't crazy was the way she was telling it and how heartfelt she was, that somehow this was all connected. And so I realized that in the lives of these people, one story bleeds into another, which then bleeds into another one, which then bleeds into another one. And then, oh, by the way, like Ted Bundy used to be over there, you know, and then bleeds into this one. And like, oh no, there are people who live in the forest who will take your children away and sell them. To then here's a weird cryptid type of mystic beast. And yes, like all the witches that we know come here to gain more power because there's some kind of spiritual energy here that they only can find in the Ocala. And I'm trying to weave those stories in and out of trying to tell that. And I didn't want to write just a normal ghost book. It's a haunted American. You know, you've written books where there's an expectation of what a ghost book should be. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of pressure put on me, I feel like, probably by myself, to make a Haunted America book. It's a Haunted America book. Yeah. And I was like, how do I possibly make this just about ghosts? Because these things are all playing in the same playground. And to tell the story the right way, you have to let them interact with each other. You have to let them play with each other and like show how, at least in people's minds, these things are all connected. And so that was kind of the fun part of writing it, but then also the really difficult part.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, you take the paranormal, and I've said this before, the paranormal is part of the metaphysical. Mm-hmm. And so some of the things that go on are metaphysical, some of it are paranormal, and then, of course, you can always argue the point that paranormal, it's not paranormal, it's just plain normal for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But, witches go into the forest, we like, where it's calm, it's peaceful, it's, like Snow White and the little birdies, and, it can be. And then, we go in for different reasons too. But in the book, you talk about odd energy in the forest and in the neighboring areas. So what kind of, define odd energy.
Wow. And how I say odd energy because I think it's so hard to define. Uh-huh. It's one of those things where people who work with energy find it amped up, right? Mm-hmm. Like they are drawn to the forest. I've known people who practice who don't know about the Ocala, who are doing like they're driving from Gainesville, University of Florida, back to Southwest Florida or to Orlando or something like that. And they just for some reason stop and get out of the car and just take the Ocala in. And then they say, like, I just felt that there was an energy that was drawing me in. But almost to a person, especially people who are sensitive to energy, people who have psychic ability, will tell you that in the Ocala, there's this attraction and repulsion, right? That it's kind of like this energy surge, but there seems to be something a little dark about the tingle. And the best of them will very easily communicate to me that they feel, which they don't normally do, they feel they need to protect themselves before they even use that energy, which they don't feel other places. With you, I'm sure you as a witch could probably explain that even better than me, but this is what they tell me. You know what I'm saying? Like this idea of, all right, I'm going to use this. I'm going to, because I feel that this stuff is more powerful, but I know that there's something off about it. There's something off-putting. There's something dark about it. There's something seductive, which they very easily can sense. And so they know they can, taste but not swallow. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, or like take a little bit in, but heavily protect themselves before they do.
Yeah. Stick their toe in the pool first before jumping in. Yeah.
Or jump in the pool, but they all make sure they have their swimmies on first, right? Like,
or their what do you call them? The doodles, the snoodles? What are those things?
We're Florida, the land of the noodles. Yes.
There you go, noodles. Okay. I knew I was close there. All right. So we've got like 5 minutes before the break, but I want you to tell us a story. This is a creepy story.
Okay.
And kind of strange, about a guy who got in touch with you, I think by email, if I'm not mistaken, and said to check out a particular social media post at a specific time the next morning, and it would be deleted in a few minutes and disappear, and that's really scary.
You just told the whole story, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I just,
no, this is...
But was that the catalyst to get you interested in the forest for the first time?
No, that was the catalyst to get me to not write the book.
Oh, okay. A warning. Good.
Yeah, this was, and you know what? Like everything that person said to me, I have backed up with other things since then. So what happened was I was getting into all of this, and the true crime was drawing me into, right? Because I wanted to do the true crime, and I was finding the same exact, I was actually working kind of with a true crime podcast called Paradise After Dark. And her and I were messaging each other back and forth because you can't watch the news without hearing someone disappeared from the Ocala, or a body was found in the Ocala, or, something like that. And so it just happened to be a string of all of these. The women all looked exactly the same. They had the exact same family structure. So I knew that the cult stuff was going on from having, been, up to my eyeballs with that, writing the first book. And so someone messaged me on Facebook Messenger, and they said, I am going to post this on my page and at like 5:00, and then I'm taking it down at 5:04. So you have to promise me you won't screenshot it. And the reporter side of me is like, yes, like whatever I do, like, okay, well, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. And what he said to me was, don't do what you're doing. All of the cult activity in the forest is connected to satanic biker gangs out of Daytona. So if you start looking into them and you start spotting them, their attention is going to be turned towards you. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. This sounds very familiar, having worked with biker gangs in, once again, Massachusetts. Only these biker gangs in Daytona already have a reputation without even the paranormal, spooky, cultish stuff of being really tough. And so I checked it. I processed it. I refreshed the page. Boom, it was gone. Went back to Facebook Messenger. He had deleted his account. I have no idea how to get in touch with this guy. And I was like, do I heed the warning or do I not heed the warning? And what I decided was that in this case, the cult stuff was going to be just context for everything else that was going on. Since then, I've done like so many interviews that are just, let's talk about the true crime stuff and the cult stuff. And it was like, I can fill hours and hours and hours telling you about that stuff that it's not, and none of it's in the book. But it was like, it was just creepy enough and just enough to be able to be confirmed that I was like, maybe this isn't best for a haunted America book. But since then, I've been able to confirm. It and find that pattern in other things. I don't know. Do we have time for me to just give you an example of it, or?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Sure. So my obsession is this serial killer named Gerard Schaefer, who, if I was working on a major project with just him. So he was imprisoned at Stark Prison, which is in the Ocala. And he started going off on his ex-girlfriend / co-author of this book, that if she did anything, he was going to kill her. He had ties to the mafia. And then he said, what's worse, I'm connected with a satanic biker gang out of Daytona. Like almost the exact same words that this guy said to me. Gerard Schaefer is one of the scariest, and we could do 5 hours just on Schaefer. One of the scariest men to ever be in existence. When Ted Bundy walks up to you and goes, "Hey, thanks for giving me the idea to kill 2 women on the same, at a time. Like, I wouldn't have thought about that." Like, this is a creepy, creepy guy. He gets shifted to another prison in the Ocala for a week, comes back and recants everything. It says, nope, there's no gangs here. There's no, like, something was so intense with that it scared one of the weirdest serial killers in U.S. history into completely changing his mind and being nervous. So something weird is going on with it.
Well, who is the guy? I mean, you don't know who the guy was, kind of, who sent you the message anyway. Yeah. But, I mean, how did they know what you were up to and who you were and you know?
It was all from that one post that I put a post on, I think it was Florida history.
Yeah.
But it was on Facebook. Okay. And that's where I just got, like, response after response after response. And it was just, I spent months just following up on the stuff that was there, not even the stuff I already had. And he had messaged me after having seen that post. I believe.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think he said, "I saw your post in Florida history," or whatever it was. And I want to share this with you.
That's scary.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to take a quick break, so everybody sit tight, and we'll be back in the blink of an eye if you're a slow blinker.
There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages. Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com.
I was in the hospital with my son for 18 months.
When he got injured, I wasn't prepared, but I knew I had to be strong.
When I was told about John's injury, I was in complete shock. I just remember rushing into his room and giving him a big hug and letting him know I was there.
These veterans and families are just a few of the heroes we serve at Homes for Our Troops. For thousands of severely injured veterans, everyday life is filled with barriers.
It was really the little things throughout the house. Counters that you can't roll up to.
I had to drag my wheelchair down steps.
I want to help, but he is so determined.
At Homes for Our Troops, we build specially adapted custom homes with features like wheelchair access, roll-in showers, and automatic door openers that allow them to function independently and focus on their recovery and family.
This house is freedom.
It's hope. It's a new beginning.
This house has given me my family back.
To learn more, visit hfotusa.org.
New Aeon Now. News and discussion of the metaphysical, the occult, the paranormal, and much, much more. With your hosts, New Aeon High Priestess, Reverend Lily Alley, head of the Untitled Chapter of the Order of Paranormal Exploration, Christine Matza. The New Aeon is now. Join us every Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for New Aeon Now.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And my guest tonight is Christopher Balzano, and we're talking about his new book, Haunted Ocala National Forest. There's so many thought-provoking and interesting stories in the book, and of course we can't get to any number of them, but yeah, they're that good. But I want you to talk about the famous ghost and famous cemetery.
Which one are you referring to?
Oh, I thought
when
there
you
was
say the famous one.
Well, it says the famous ghost and famous cemetery. And I can tell you in a minute. Okay, let me while I go looking for that.
I'm sometimes more witty in my chapter titles than I need to be. All
right. Well, here, answer this question. Oh, go ahead.
Sure. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I can just throw in something in the beginning. I mean, okay,
yeah.
Let's do this. You mentioned that people are affected and get infected by something that you refer to as the Ocala syndrome. Explain that.
Yeah, that's the kind of the idea that I was talking about before, that people who have paranormal experiences outside of the forest, associated with having been in the forest or that they're close to it. So I have probably about almost an entire book now of things that happen in Sumter County, which is just outside the forest. But if you ask anyone else, they'd say, well, no, but people in that area think they're infected by their proximity to it. So all of these weird, crazy paranormal happenings happen there, and they go, and they've got the green swamp. I mean, why not attribute it to the green swamp? And they go, nope, it's because of the forest. It's because of the forest. And so it was like, do I add those stories? Do I not add those stories? Eventually I didn't, because I was like, I had so much. I had another book, just with those things. But then I found out, no, they're connected by phosphorus mines that run underneath the ground between these two places. And that happens all around. So someplace like Daytona, which is not a forest at all, they consider themselves impacted by the Ocala because part of their county touches it. And so when weird things go wrong, they go, yep, well, that's the forest. That's the forest for you. And so people use it, even if they're, let's say, 50 miles away, they still think, well, I was in the Ocala once, and so that is why it happened. And so they have this weird thing of associating, or I lived there as a child and something has followed me. Or the weird thing is when I talk to people, being an outsider, I live 3 hours away from it. I don't live anywhere near it, right? Back in the day, when I was in New England, I could cover 4 states in 3 hours, right? I don't even go part way through Florida in 3 hours. As I was traveling there, people would tell me these stories, and they would email me these stories, and I would say, well, where is it? And they would have no idea. They just knew it was in the Ocala. And so I would say, well, are you on the east side of it or the west side of it? And they would say, I don't know. I'm like, well, how do you not know where you are? How do you not know where you are geographically? And so that's part of the syndrome as well. They just kind of seem to become consumed or confused by where they are when they're anywhere near the forest. So it's a kind of this dual-edged syndrome that I call it.
All right. Well, the famous Ghost in Cemetery, I mean, what caught my eye when I was looking at it at first was something about Ozzy Osbourne's bus.
Yeah. So in I can tell you that story at least.
Yeah, I like that one.
So Ozzy Osbourne, kind of, he had his time with Black Sabbath, and then he kind of had he had a falling out with them, and he started his own group. And he found this absolute virtuoso on the guitar named Randy Rhoads. And Randy Rhoads was a really young guy, even compared to Ozzy at that time. And he took the music industry by storm. And they were touring, and they put out 2 of the biggest heavy metal albums of all time, within a year. They were touring on the second one, which I believe was Bark at the Moon was the second one. They were touring on it, and they were driving through Florida, and there was trouble with their van, with their car, their bus, right? And so they decided to stop at this place in Leesburg, Florida, which is in the Ocala, to fix the bus, kind of chill out for a little bit. The bus driver also had experience as a pilot, and Leesburg is known for all of these little private airfields. He also had a really bad cocaine habit, and so he hops into one of the planes. And Randy Rhoads hops in the plane with him, and they start just kind of flying around Leesburg. And then they decide, you know what we're going to do? We're going to freak everybody out we're going to, Top Gun style, we're going to fly as close as we can to the bus to freak out the rest of the band. And I believe on the 3rd time that they went by, the wing clipped the bus, the plane crashed, and everybody died. And the heat was so intense that they couldn't even identify like the bodies, which body was which, by dental records or anything. I mean, it was just they knew who was in the plane, and so those were the people who died.
Wow.
Well, since then, that plane has been spotted. The ghost of that plane has been spotted in Leesburg. And so it flies around this little location, this little private airfield in Leesburg, and crashes. So people see this plane, then the plane disappears, and they hear a crash. They actually feel the earth move sometimes. Like, it's a pretty intense thing. And it's one of these, like, known hauntings that people just kind of say they experience it. So I actually went out there with my kids because my son is a huge Ozzy Osbourne and Randy Rhoads fan. And, you know, it was COVID at that time, and so everything was locked down. And so what can you do except for to go to an empty airfield and look for ghosts, right? And we happened to go on the anniversary of the crash. And so it was just supposed to be fun to some degree, looking at a historic site, you know, historic only to music fans, right? And so we're in the field. We're as close as we can get. We have all these great pictures of us playing air guitar and trying to, like, you know, get EVPs and playing Ozzy Osbourne music to try to, like, you know, encourage something. And it was a clear night. There were almost no clouds in the sky, and we heard planes. And we heard a plane crash right at the exact site. That wouldn't have been at the exact same time because that happened in the morning and this was, you know, at dusk. But we all stopped for a moment and we were like, we just experienced that. Like, that was something real. There was a plane. We couldn't see any plane, and then we heard a crash.
Well, that's kind of like in Gettysburg, on the battlefields, people hear cannons going off and guns going off, and they don't see them. But yeah,
the echoes of those battles. And I've experienced that a few different places in Florida. I don't think I've ever experienced it outside of Florida, but where battles were said to have happened, and you get that psychic impression, you get that occurring moment of war or of violence or something like that, of something big like that, like something out, especially outside, like a battle or a plane crash or something like that. I'm still trying to get down to Florida if I can get some kind of psychic hiccup of the infamous Flight 401. That crashed in the swamp in Miami. We still need to do an episode on that too, but it's one of those legend trips that I don't really want to do because it involves spending a lot of time in a swamp.
Oh, well, you just get leeches and crocodiles and all that good stuff. It would be very invigorating.
It's funny because if anyone who follows my social media, 10% of the time that I go to the Ocala, I get a ripped flat tire. Not even a flat tire. I get a shredded tire for unexplained reasons. And probably 40% of the time I go into the Ocala, if I go outside, I get ticks. And ticks are my biggest fear in life.
I can imagine. I can imagine. They're creepy, nasty little things. And way off topic, but when I first got my old dog Callie, when we brought her home from the pound, we didn't know, but she had ticks, or at least one. And so about 3 weeks into it, my cleaning lady was, you know, looking around the house, and she comes to me and she says, come here, look. And she picks up the dog. It was a puppy then. And there's this thing on his stomach or her stomach. And I looked at Rosa. I said, what is it? And she goes, tick. And
Marla, I said, why are you doing this to me? I just said it's my worst fear, and you're telling me a tick story.
Well, no, I mean, it was just that Rosa ran up and she grabbed it and she popped it out. I mean, like it was nothing, and that creeped me out. All right, well, then we'll go from ticks to
wait,
Stikini.
no, Marla, wait, Marla, guess what? This will freak you out. You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, right now on the halftime show of the NFL kickoff, Ozzy Osbourne's playing.
That doesn't freak me out. I like that.
I was going to say, that's part of your life, right?
Yeah.
Like that hashtag follow the signs is kind of like the guiding force of tripping on legends, and that kind of stuff happens all the time.
Yeah. I like that. Okay.
So what are the odds we talk about Ozzy Osbourne? He's literally playing live right now.
Well, I'm terrible at math, but, you know, I just leave it up to the universe, and they do stuff like that, and it cracks me up. I like that.
It tells you where to go, right? So.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. So, okay, from ticks to stikinis. What is a stikini?
Wow. Okay. So what I want your listeners to do is to think of like 4 or 5 of the creepiest things they could possibly imagine. Shake them into a bag, and you have the stikini. The stikini are seminal, witch, vampire owls.
Oh.
Who have been cursed and now walk the woods of the Ocala and a little bit outside the Ocala, looking for men to drink their blood, rip out their intestines, and make a soup out of them.
Ah.
So your typical Ocala type creature. And this is like, they're a great example of like, well, are they a ghost? Are they a haunting? What are they? So the story goes that there were these seminal women who, first originally it was just one, and she had been cheated on by her husband. And so she called upon this goddess known as She Who Walks the Circle, and she wanted the power to get revenge on her husband. Well, kind of like a vengeance demon, right? She wanted the power to get revenge. And so she was granted that power, and after she got back at her husband, she didn't want to give back the power. She became seduced by it. And so she started to cast these weird spells against other men who she thought had hurt other women or who she thought were bad men. And every time she cast one of these spells, she lost a little bit more of her humanity and a little bit more of humanity, kind of like the Wendigo, right? Mm-hmm. And then eventually she just completely transformed into this vampire owl. So by day, she can walk the forest, she can walk the Ocala, and she seems as if this beautiful Native American woman who can seduce people into the woods. And then at night, she becomes this owl vampire who then slaughters them and drinks their blood and kind of disembowels them for the good eats inside. Mm-hmm. And there are enough of these Stikini that they've formed a coven. Oh. And so there's this coven of these Stikini witches who are in the woods just trolling for victims. And if you ask people, because there are a lot, I mean, there are dozens every year, people who mysteriously disappear in the woods. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, there are many more potential victims that no one knows about because of these people who are known as the rainbow people. Mm-hmm. They're this kind of, once a year they meet, they listen to music, like they live in the forest for a week or for 10 days. And it's like a big music festival. It's a big like coming together of like-minded people. But in Florida, a lot of them don't leave. And so the missing persons that could potentially be rainbow people is also very high. Like people are just never seen again. And people are like, well, I thought they were going off to the Rainbow Festival or the Rainbow meetings. Many of those disappeared people are said to be victims of the Stikini.
Mm. Yeah, the rainbow people kind of creeped me out when I was reading about that.
You know, they are the X factor of the Ocala because it's very, they've been infiltrated by people who aren't very nice people. Mm. And so all of them get a bad reputation because there are some people living in there who are from those biker gangs or who are from other cults that have sketchy things, and they're just kind of blending with the rainbow people. Mm-hmm. And as part of that Ocala syndrome, when something goes wrong, people automatically say it's the rainbow people.
Yeah.
Or if someone disappears, they say, well, the rainbow people took them. They're in the Ocala now, and you'll never find them. So it's this very weird mixture of, like, are they the monsters that took them? Are they the serial killers that are active in the forest? Or are they the rainbow people? Are the rainbow people even rainbow people? Or are they the serial killer? Like, it's this mysterious, like, hodgepodge of conspiracy theories, which all seem to make sense when you look at them far away and close up.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking about all kinds of different phenomenon that goes on in the forest, and ghost lights are one of them. Now, ghost lights are a very controversial subject, depending on who you're speaking to. So tell us a little bit about the forest lights, and I'd like to hear your theory about ghost lights.
I don't think, I think a lot of paranormal science doesn't hold water. So when people hear the term ghost light, automatically they say it's swamp gas that's exploding, right?
Yep.
And okay, maybe that you can attribute some of the sightings to that, but in the Ocala and some of the surrounding towns, the ghost lights don't just float, right? Or they don't just seem to be traveling in a straight line, or they dance with each other. They dart like a UFO. They dart, and then they come back, and then they go high, and then they go low. Like last time I checked, fire can't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like something that explodes can't do that. Even if you say, like, because we have lightning here, right? And lightning strikes, and lightning takes weird journeys sometimes.
Sure.
Right? But like these seem to be playful or talking. So you have places like the Oviedo Lights, which are the quintessential legend trip, right? Back in the 50s and 60s, you didn't have to go to the movies if you were in Central Florida. You didn't have to go to the old time fountain shoppy. No, you got your date. You took her to go see these Ocala lights, and maybe you got a little lucky in the backseat of your car. And there would literally be a dozen cars out there on any given night looking at these lights. Now the story goes is that the original one was either a wandering Native American who was thrown out of Oviedo when he tried to come in. He was trying to get in. Instead, he was killed, and he was not buried. He was just kind of tossed on the side of the road. And the original Oviedo light is just him trying to get back to his home in Oviedo. The other story is a guy came home from World War II. The woman that he loved had decided to marry someone else, and so he went to the bridge that goes into Oviedo, and he committed suicide. But for some reason, his spirit got trapped. Well, over the years, it wasn't just one light or two lights. Like, all of a sudden, there were half a dozen lights, and then there were a dozen lights, and they were different colors, and they were dancing with each other, and some of them would chase cars, and some of them would dance in the sky, and so every urban legend you can imagine started getting attached to them. Well, you know what happened? There was a Boy Scout troop, and one of the kids went missing, and all the Boy Scouts went out in the woods to try to find him, and they all got lost, and they were never found, and the Oviedo lights are them trying to find their way back home. Or people were making out in their cars, and you know what happened? They got a little too familiar, weren't paying attention, and the Oviedo lights came and took them. So don't go there and have sex, because sex is bad, and you'll die and be a ghost light for the rest of eternity. Right? Like every urban legend you can possibly imagine, and yet people kept going and kept going. It became so popular, there would be advertisements the college is known as UCF now, University of Central Florida, but it was University, like Florida Technical University, I think was its name. They would have advertisements in their newspaper saying, okay, so the art club is going out to the Oviedo Lights this weekend. Sign up if you want to go with them. Or, the chess team is sponsoring an event taking people to the Oviedo Lights. So get in contact. The physics department, now this was a technical university, the physics department had more than one meeting where they discussed the potential that the Oviedo Lights were ghosts. Like, that's how popular these ghosts were. Now, not every ghost light in the in the forest is that popular, but that's a good example of just how prevalent they are in different places.
Yeah, that's very cool. Time's growing short. Too bad. You're going to have to come back and tell stories. But I want you to talk a little bit, let people know about the podcast, where they can find it, when they can find it, the kind of stuff, what's coming up, all that good stuff.
So the podcast, like I said, is called Tripping on Legends. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. We're not on Spotify because we try to go live with video as much as we possibly can, and Spotify doesn't like video. It's not a political thing or anything like that. We try to broadcast Tuesdays at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. It doesn't always work out that way because I'm a single dad and there's a lot going on. And of course, this is holiday season, so I'm doing 1,000 events. But you can find the podcast anywhere you want. The best place to go is facebook.com/tripping on legends, because everything we do ends up on Facebook. So it's a really good way to like just kind of scroll through the history of what we've done. On Instagram, we're at Spooky Tripping. And it's just, it's one of those things where we don't always do a show that specifically talks about a legend in Florida. And oftentimes we use a smaller story in Florida to talk about bigger issues. It's really about kind of like the folklore of the paranormal. So if you're like, well, I don't live near Florida, and I get my fill of Florida from Florida Man, so I don't need to hear about them. It's actually an exploration into ghostly legends from all over the place and ghostly legend ideas. So it's really one of those things where you might find us talking about Candyman on one night, and then talking about Five Nights at Freddy's another night, and then talking about, the ghostly legend in Sarasota the next. So it's an interesting show in that way, I think.
It is. And you have a ton of books. Well, not a ton, but half a ton. So where do you have a website or just
I do. The website is trippingonlegends.com. If you go there, you can order a signed copy of the book. But if not, you can just go to Amazon or wherever you get your books, and they're all up there. Like I said, my two most recent ones are Haunted Ocala National Forest, and then probably one of my favorite ones that I've written, which is Haunted Florida Love Stories, which are ghostly legends in Florida, and all of the backstories have to do with love in some way.
And let's not forget your Bridgewater Triangle book, which was kind of like the first one, right?
Yeah, it was the second one written, but the first one published. So it's always hard to say what it is,
okay.
But yeah, I've got Dark Woods, Cults, Crime, and the Paranormal in the Freetown State Forest, and then the follow-up to that was Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle. So those are out there as well. As well as some of my older ones like Ghostly Adventures is still up there, and every once in a while you can find a copy of Haunted Objects, which is probably my favorite one that I've ever written. But it went out of print really quickly. It didn't sell nearly as well as we thought it was going to. And Tim Weisberg and I co-wrote that, and we're actually looking to publish it independently because the rights to it have gone back to us.
Oh, that'd be great.
Because it's anyone who's read the book really likes it. It's just it was marketed really poorly, and so it didn't have a chance to kind of haunt people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really think 'tis the season, and maybe you should come back and tell some stories as we think about.
Anytime you want, I will. I would love. Have we ever told the Arbuckle Creek story? I think maybe last time. I was on the one you were.
Yeah.
But it is. I've moved away from evidence completely. Even this book was a little bit of a departure from that, and I am just a haunted folklore storyteller right now. And I find that that's what really engages people, and people want to hear that. So anytime you want me to come on and just do an hour of stories that people that are not in the books, that people just kind of I've been noticing this here, or telling a story about this, and the book, one of the books I'm working on right now is called Whistling Past the Graveyard, or Whistling Past the Cemetery, and I am finding so many interesting stories in cemeteries all across the country and beyond. I would love to tell those stories for your guests, too, sometimes.
Good. Thanks. We will do that for sure. But in the meantime, we're going to thank you for being here tonight. And,
thank you very much for having me. It's always good to talk to you.
And we also thank everybody that's listening, be it live or podcast. And until next time, everybody, blessed be, and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.